we will, item number 1, we will review the agenda we have for our Monday, January 23rd meeting. If you all can go through that agenda. I know Chris has.
Mr. Vice Mayor, just quickly, for items 5A and 6B, those items are posted for the part of the study session, so we'll cover those after review this agenda. I think I'm saying that right. And also, but we also have presentations on items 8 and 9 that are on the agenda today. So we've got a variety of presentations. So if you have any questions other than those 4 items, we can answer those now. Otherwise, we have presentations on 5, 6, 8, and 9.
All right. Any of the council members have any questions on additional? Councilwoman Duff?
It's more out of curiosity for item 4E about the fingerprinting services for various cities departments due to a new, a state bill that is passed requiring an expansion of fingerprinting. It seems like this is a huge impact on cities to do this, and I just wanted to know, isn't an SB 1602, there it is someone from government relations here? Maybe I will just follow up on that. It's just a curiosity thing. Is not
what the bill, what that expanded to. We can get back to you on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because you're right. It's going from 1,700 to 7,000. That's
yeah, and it's
so sometimes
like,
that could include. Remember, this includes not just city employees, but those who volunteer and contractors who do work with the city too. So, but let me confirm all that.
Yeah, just curious on that. I know it's a state bill. We don't have a lot of deliberation on that. We have to follow it, but sometimes I get concerned about the legislature passing these things and the impacts it has on the cities. I don't think they, so I'm just curious about that.
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Councilwoman, go for it.
Follow-up question. I have a follow-up question for on 7B. And I just want to make sure that, and clarify for the rest of the council, that that modification only applies to the 2 acres of that site parcel, not to the full 22 plus.
Yes, Vice Mayor Heredia and Councilwoman Goforth, yeah, that's correct. It only applies to that eastern portion that is directly adjacent to Recker, and it's just that site plan review, and it is the modification to the conditions to allow for the site plan.
And the modifications to conditions is specifically for the increase in parking? Or are there other things that?
The modifications to the conditions were because the original approval conditioned it to the site plan at the time that was approved. So we have to go back and modify that condition to allow for a new site plan to be introduced for that eastern portion. So there's no changes to the bonus intensity zone deviations that were part of that original approval.
Okay. So there were several, any change has to go back?
It would, yes. So any change to that development on the western side would have to come forth.
And were there several changes? Were there building movements and things, or is it?
On this eastern portion that you're seeing today, there are.
Okay.
But the western portion, we have not seen the proposal from the applicant yet, so we don't have that before us.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the agenda?
I have one, Vice Mayor.
Councilman.
Chris, on 6A, just the update to the Mesa City Code regarding the Mesa Fire Department name, and just maybe an overview of how that's transpired. Chief Camelli, okay, she's here, great. Morning, Chief. I know we've kind of modified our name over the years. We've morphed into Mesa Fire and Medical. And so is this the official process?
Sure. Vice Mayor Heredia, Councilmember Freeman, members of the council, that's absolutely what this is. We went through an accreditation process. It's the 5th time that our department has been accredited. Thanks to Mr. Brady and city management and council for allowing us to do that each year. In the accreditation process, they are the ones that advised us about the ordinance and that it was outdated. And so at that point, we have included the name. The old ordinance had, it was very gender specific, and it had only that we fight fire and do fire prevention. So we were able to update that with the support here of city management, update the ordinance now to read our new name, including medical and all of the services we provide today.
Okay. Thank you. That's the question I had.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions? I don't know, which one you want to
So
start?
I would suggest let's stay on this agenda before we go back to the study session. So staff, if we could have presenting on 8, an update of where we are with those. Mary, you're going to, okay, thanks. Where those discussions are?
Those are 8A and 8B, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah, mostly probably related to 8B. Oh.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Heredia, council members. Today we have a presentation on the Baseline Logistics, to be renamed Baseline Business Park, located at Baseline Road, west of Sunview and east of Higley Road. The request from the applicant is to rezone for an industrial development. So from the planned employment park with a planned area development overlay with a council use permit to a planned employment park and light industrial with the planned area development. We also had a site plan review as part of the request. The general plan shows that the current designation is specialty district with a medical campus character area. We've got the current zoning again is the PEP with the planned area development, and what they're looking to propose is light industrial and planned employment park with the planned area development. This would allow for a variety of uses such as office, research and development, and light manufacturing. We also have a development agreement that we've been working very closely with the applicant and the city attorney's office to prohibit some land uses to ensure that the uses that go into the building are compatible in the area. This site plan shows that there are 8 buildings, approximately 650,000 square feet. The requested planned area deviations are for the building height to increase it from 40 feet to 50 feet and some parking reductions. As part of the application, the applicant had proposed mechanisms to minimize the traffic that's going to the east along Sunview as it goes in front of the AT Still campus. We have a meeting this afternoon with the applicant and AT Still to talk about some of the circulation, and Eric is here if there are any questions about that circulation. Just for the council's information, we did have a condition of approval from the planning and zoning that they had placed onto the project, that before any circulation is finalized, that the transportation team would work with the applicant on what that looks like to both meet the needs of the development, to minimize traffic in front of AT Still, and to meet what the city's needs are for that corridor.
Councilwoman Spilsbury?
Are you wanting to finish and then we'll ask questions about that particular part?
It's up to you, however the council wants to do it. I only have one more slide.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So staff has found that the project complies with the 2040 Mesa General Plan. It complies with the criteria in Chapter 2 as it relates to the planned area development, and it complies with the criteria of Chapter 69 as it relates to the site plan review. Staff is recommending approval with conditions.
Thank you. So I know originally we talked about doing 2 circle cul-de-sacs that abutted, and that maybe isn't the plan anymore. So I was just wondering, Eric, if you could explain to us what are some of the things you do to mitigate that traffic so the truck traffic gets pushed west? Explain what some of those are.
Sure. Good morning, Vice Mayor Heredia, Councilmember Spilsbury. Eric Gadarian, the Deputy Transportation Director. So I think going back historically, we've always viewed the Sunview Inverness corridor continuing through, and part of the reason for that is the Wrecker Road essentially ends at Baseline. It does not intersect with the US 60 and carries traffic over to Higley Road and the US 60 interchange. So our proposal, what we're showing just with a few colored dots up there, is the rest of Inverness and Sunview are built with medians, that we would continue medians through the development, and that would really control the driveway access and force heavy vehicles, trucks from the north half of the development. They would, to leave the site, they would need to then turn right or head west towards Higley Road.
Okay, so pretty much just through medians. And is it my understanding that some of those specifics don't have to be decided before we vote on the site plan? I think we we do the site plan, and if some of that still happens, it's okay.
Yeah, and I think, Councilman Spilsbury, we wanted to make it clear, because there were some comments made about the cul-de-sacs, and we just want to be clear that that really had not been signed off on by the Transportation Department. So we're kind of advancing the conversation, because we know how critical this issue was for the applicant, well, for both sides, right?
Yes.
And so instead of them kind of coming up with their own solution that may not necessarily have been ideal for us for public streets and allowing people to have use of a public street, we're advancing this idea, maybe ahead of, typically this may be a conversation after this gets approved, but we're advancing this conversation now and just sharing with council that I think our Transportation Department has come up with a solution that allows a mitigation against truck traffic going east, and actually encouraging it to go west where it really gets on the freeway much easier. So just so that both sides kind of have a better sense before, while we're in the midst of making decisions now.
Okay, because I know that was a huge concern of AT still, and I wanted to, I just wanted a better understanding of whether this goes through though, but is there anything that needs, I mean, are there guarantees that are made when you vote on something that certain things will happen? You know what I mean? We're just, the understanding is that all that traffic's gonna try to be pushed to the west, the truck traffic.
Yeah, it's a goal. We will work on mitigation, but at the same time, Eric can speak to this. We still have this is still a public street, and we still have other users. The YMCA. You have some other businesses to the west, and there's an expectation at some point that they can drive on a public street. So the cul-de-sacs really didn't accomplish that. Yeah. But we're still trying to be very sensitive to the idea of not or discouraging or encouraging truck traffic to go away from. Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
And Vice Mayor and Council, if I could just follow up on that, is that, stipulations like this, the public roadway is not part of the site plan, right? That's the city's property. And so these type of stipulations aren't that common, because usually you don't see stipulations on the roadway on the site plan. And so this was really to try to address some of the issues at AT Still. And so this, just so you know, this stipulation in itself is an acknowledgement of trying to help resolve issues between the adjoining property owners that is not very common. And so, and as the stipulation states, it'll be resolved before the building permit application. So it will be afterwards. And so it will, but the very fact that we have this stipulation is sort of a unique situation in trying to address AT Still's concerns.
I think that's all we have to say.
Any questions, Ms. Spilsbury?
So since I know there's a meeting today, then we'll be told what results of that meeting are before we meet again on Monday for the final vote, or would be just if there's anything that changes?
Yeah, I don't know that. I think, again, this is an idea that under the weight is just, as the city attorney explained it, typically the council would go ahead and approve the zoning case, and then afterwards and before the permit is issued, we would work out this with the applicant. But,
well, I mean just anything that maybe gets brought up in the meeting.
I think most of all the other items in the DA and have been agreed to by both sides. Have we gotten comments on?
Yeah, AT Still, I'm not sure if they.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. We're still. We'll let you know if there's still outstanding issues on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Duff?
Can we have a review, excuse me, on the development agreement, exactly what the basic terms are of that, since it's changed so much? It's quite long.
Sarah?
We're glad.
Morning, Council. Yes, the development agreement, the terms have been agreed to by the developer and the city. AT still has some concerns that I think we'll talk about today with them, but we've addressed some of their concerns in the current version of the development agreement already. The intent of the development agreement is to encourage manufacturing and research and development uses on the property. Sorry, I get out of breath now. And the way that we do that is to prohibit certain uses on the property, as well as restrict warehousing and wholesale on the property. And the way we restrict warehousing and wholesale is both by percentage in each individual building on the property overall, and then also to encourage those uses to only be secondary uses to the manufacturing and research and development. So the intent is we don't want to have standalone warehousing and storage and wholesale on the property. And any sort of warehousing and wholesale that would be on the property would be to serve a manufacturing or research and development use.
Okay. So let's say you have supplies for that manufacturing. Would that be considered manufacturing, or is that considered warehousing?
So the development agreement sets forth how to determine whether a use is manufacturing or is warehousing. And the way that we do that is we look at each individual tenant's space within the building, however many square feet that may be. And if they use more than 49% of their space for that warehousing and storage, their entire space will be deemed warehousing and storage and counted against what we call the cap on the property. The intent of that is to encourage that you use less than that percentage, and which would mean that it's a secondary use to your primary use of manufacturing or research and development. Because we're understanding that with those manufacturing uses, you need some room to store the products as well.
Right, right. So I assume the intent of doing this is so that we can push into employment instead of the warehousing and distribution. Is the parking set up to ensure, to accommodate that as well? Or, because I see a lot of truck stalls, for moving goods, but as far as employment, are we setting it up for success or to be a problem?
Vice Mayor Heredia, Councilmember Duff. So they did request a parking reduction with this, but through the parking study, we do see that is sufficient. With a lot of our industrial uses, it's pretty typical to have a parking reduction. So they do have sufficient parking to serve their employees, yes.
To support office and manufacturing?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council, and there's a long list of restricted uses or prohibited uses within the council report. It would be too long for me to even read them. That's how many there are. And so the property owner developers also agreed to a number of other restrictions on the actual uses. It's also important to remember that half this property is not being rezoned. It already has its zoning. And so this development agreement and the restrictions are going over the whole property. And so the property owner is agreeing to a number of restrictions, including no cross docks on the entire property, even though they could develop a portion of this property without a rezoning. So, this is a significant and important development agreement.
Go ahead.
Originally, the intent was to have it be in medical use or support. And I think we're just pulling away from that and just looking for employment. I know the restrictions of the types of businesses are really narrowing it, but still, I think, where are we on that? I think we're giving up on the medical aspect of it.
I would say also it's for research and development and manufacturing, and so encouraging that and not just simply warehousing for purposes of warehousing for resale. That's why you're getting rid of the cross docks and also limiting warehousing to 49%. And then as Sarah explained how you do the calculation, if you're a majority of warehousing, your whole space becomes warehousing. And so you can see how you really need to be a manufacturing or an R&D type of use. And so You know, we're encouraging a variety of, it's more than just employment, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and these are both 8A and 8B, right?
Right, the zoning and then the development agreement.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, we'll move on to item 9. Rachel?
All right. Morning, Council. So this item before you it's a little unique. So the city has received an appeal to a approval of a site plan that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. So it is being appealed up to City Council. So they approved on October 26 a site plan for a self-storage facility. So this project is located south of Broadway and east of Country Club Drive. And you can see on the map before you, we're indicating the location of where the appellant is. So that's kind of directly next to this property. So we haven't had an appeal come to council for several years. I believe the last one was 2015. So we just wanted to give you just a little kind of brief overview of this process. So appeals can be filed by applicants, property owners, or any other aggrieved persons. There are certain requirements in the zoning ordinance for an appeal to be deemed complete and sufficient. So they have to be filed within 15 days of that approving action, and they have to contain specific information as far as what the grounds of the appeal are. So the appeal that's coming to you today, the council has a couple of options of what they can do with it. They can affirm, reverse, or modify the previous decision by the Planning and Zoning Board, or they can remand the matter back to the Planning and Zoning Board to discuss more and to consider again. So this appeal, as mentioned earlier, was filed by John Conover. He was the owner of that single-family residence that's located just directly to the east of that property. So that appeal did meet all the criteria of Chapter 77 for consideration. And the claims are the grounds for this appeal is that the appellant is saying that the Planning and Zoning Board lacked the authority to approve the site plan and requests that a CUP be obtained for portions of the property that require a council use permit for self-storage. So the site plan has three zoning districts on it. The property has 3 zoning districts, one of which does not allow for self-storage without a council use permit. The appellant also claims that the public participation requirements were not met and that the Planning and Zoning Board failed to add conditions of approval that would have protected the property owner's rights. So up on the screen is the proposed site plan. So it's roughly a 26,000 square foot self-storage facility that's three stories. As you can see, there is a 15-foot setback to that property on the east. That is the appellant's property. 10 feet is required, so they provided a little bit more to try to buffer that. They also provided a 6-foot screen wall adjacent to their building, so they would have 10 feet of landscaping in between the appellant's property there to help buffer them, and then have the screen wall in addition. So the site plan is it's consistent with all of the requirements of the general plan and the zoning ordinance. We are adding an additional condition of approval to address some crime prevention through environmental design. It's called SEPTIT. It's kind of a mouthful. So on that eastern property, as we were describing, the applicant had already proposed that they have a screen wall right here, and it comes up adjacent to this property. The appellant has a chain link fence surrounding their land here. So we want to make sure we're adding a condition that they put a gate right here at the northern portion of this wall so that people can't get in here, so it can't be a hiding space for anybody. So just to secure that a little bit more, and having a gate so that the property, the applicant for the self-storage facility can still come in and maintain all this landscaping, but secure it up. So this just shows the landscaping plan. I went through the design review board. They had some minor comments about having a gate to secure this back area with the parking, and then kind of adding some additional pedestrian area right here on the corner of Morris and Broadway. So the general plan designation is mixed, as well as the zoning being mixed on this property. So it is a combination of employment, neighborhood, and a transit area station. So employment encourages a variety of places to work, which includes warehousing and storage. Neighborhood aims to have places that are clean, safe, and healthy for people to live. And transit area stations are areas that are close to our transit, that we want to have high level of activity, and we want to really encourage buildings to engage the street. So this diagram here is an overlay of the zoning on the site plan. So currently it has 3 zoning districts. Downtown Business 2 is the majority of that. That's 1.3 acres, and that is this northern portion here. That's kind of this darker blue. There's general commercial, which is on the southwest of the property. This accounts for 0.1 acres here. And then light industrial is this, it's a little hard to distinguish, but this lighter blue on the southeast corner, which only accounts for 0.18 acres. So the self-storage facility is a permitted use in the Downtown Business 2 district, and it's located entirely within the DB2 portion of the site. In the general commercial, we just have a retention area, and in the light industrial area, there is just some parking spaces and a trash enclosure. To aid in this discussion, our zoning administrator has provided an interpretation to kind of explain how the city handles mixed-use zoning on a property. There's a lot of information on this slide that I won't go over, but in that interpretation, it discusses the principal use, the accessory uses, and how those get determined of where they can be placed when there's mixed zoning on a property. I think just to summarize it, when there's split zoning, if you have accessory uses such as that trash, that parking, it can be located in a different zoning district as long as it's on the same lot as a primary use. And just for your information, this interpretation is not before council, but it was just an FYI that is there to help provide some explanation. So citizen participation was completed by the applicant. They notified properties within 500 feet. They notified the HOAs and registered neighborhoods within 1 mile. One of the grounds for the appeal said that they did not complete their citizen participation as required. As you know, we changed our notification process back in August, so staff actually does provide all the mailing addresses for what the notification boundary is. So we did check that. The owner of that property was on that list. The applicants have to bring in those letters to staff to deliver to the post office, so we do know that those were delivered and provided. And we also have evidence in the citizen participation report that the applicant did contact the neighboring resident. So with this, staff finds that it does comply with the Mesa 2040 general plan. It complies with the criteria of 69 for site plan review, and we are recommending that City Council affirm Planning and Zoning Board's approval of the site plan.
So, Vice Mayor, I think this is a unique parcel that we probably all driven by several times. And so put it in perspective, let's go to slide 3 maybe. I wish we had a better view of the whole site, because it would bring, you would all know what it is.
Is it this one?
Next, no, the one that says location on it?
It's number 3.
There are 3, there you go. So this is, you know the location now, right? Broadway, Country Club, you have the ramp coming up to Broadway. Essentially a vacant piece of property, except for this one single family unit that's kind of shown there at 410 South Morris. You've got quite a bit of industrial around it. You've got Paz de Cristo just, kind of diagonal from here. A lot of other industrial surrounding this. And so I think that's probably part of the challenge here too, is the use really should be something kind of like a storage unit, but it just happens that there's for whatever reason, and I don't know the historic, you've got a home sitting right here on the edge. And so we've tried to do everything we can. You can see the conditions, the SEPTED, to try to, create a compatible fit, but it's hard when you have a 3-story storage unit next to a residential, but I think we've tried to accommodate both sides. But I think there's your conflict, right? Right now, there's a small photo of the site with a home, but it's just the home, and then it's just dirt, right? There's nothing there today. So anyway, I just want to set that context because I think that's very important, as you can see both sides in this kind of trying to balance this out. So thanks.
Ms. Pillsbury.
I have a few questions. Is it being used as a single-family home or as a business?
No,
there is a family living there.
Yeah, I think there's a renter, I think is, right?
Yes, that's correct.
A renter, okay, because in that slide that's talked about their addresses, it said a business name on slide 13.
Under the county assessors, that's what's listed as the owner, is that, and it looks like it might be a real estate kind of business. I'm trying to think of where it was.
So, but they own that and they're renting it out to someone that's actually living there with a family.
Yeah, it appears, for everything we see. Yeah.
And I watched the planning and zoning case on this, but I'm trying to remember, were there other concerns by anyone in the citizen participation that came out? It was just the Conovers that came and spoke at the meeting?
That's correct.
So no one else had any issues. In slide, what slide is this? 6, one of the grounds for appeal was that they failed to add conditions of approval. Do you know what specifically they would want?
Councilmember Spilsbury, from my recollection, I don't remember any discussion about any suggested conditions to be added, so okay. I don't know what additional conditions that the appealant would have wanted.
Okay.
One of the concerns that was raised was about that area between the existing chain link fence and the retention wall that will be built. And so that's why staff, after planning and zoning, is coming forward with that new condition of approval that they're recommending that you adopt to put up that lock gate to prevent the pedestrian access back there.
So I was just wondering, in the appeal, if he actually said which specific things they would want to see to be able to be okay with it.
No, the appellant didn't make specific, these are the conditions we're looking at. He just brought up general concerns about people accessing that area.
And we share that. As I looked at it, that was a great concern, is that, we want a setback, but then the setback creates this corridor, this hidden corridor between this 3-story building and a home.
That would be a great place for someone to
so that's why we went to the SEPTED to kind
Okay.
of help us with crime prevention. And that's where I think we came up with the gates to keep that secure, so you don't have people getting in between.
So any conditions of approval like that would be changed, that can all happen without it going back to P&Z or anything?
Staff has actually recommended adding another condition of approval to what the Planning and Zoning Board had approved, and that is in the staff report.
Specific to that?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Did they, maybe this isn't part of the conversation, but did they try to buy out this property when they were putting the storage unit?
We can only guess.
Plans?
That would be a good idea, but we don't know.
Okay, so we have no idea of that information, whether they tried to buy out that property. Okay, because it seems like it would make sense to knock out that little.
And there may be ongoing conversations, we don't know.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all my questions, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council, just follow up. It's, the additional condition is on page 5 of the staff report, if you want to see it, and it's number 4, because Planning and Zoning approved it with 3 conditions, and so it'd be a 4th condition, and yes, you can add that at the hearing on Monday. Additionally, the criteria for the review, because this is not a rezoning, it's a site plan only case being appealed. There's specific criteria in the code, And that's an 11-69-5, which is also referenced in the staff report. But if you ever want to look at all the criteria, it's actually in this, there's a city code, and if you want, I can email it to you.
Okay, the appellant, is that how you say it? Appellant. The appellant hasn't reached out to me. I don't know if you guys have talked, but I mean, I would be curious to know like what specific conditions they were looking for other than that, but no one's aware of any other ones. Okay.
Mr. Summers?
Thank you. A few questions. So we've added some elements of this, the SEPTED design. One of those is lighting. Is lighting being encouraged in this? Because people can jump a fence. So are they doing anything for lighting, cameras, anything of that nature to help further deter these folks? Or are they agreeing to do anything with respect to trespassing? So if they do find people on that site that are trespassing, PD would be able to move them off the site and try to get them into shelter?
Vice Mayor Heredia, Councilmember Summers. So there is lighting incorporated with the building, and that's that can be a little bit of a challenge because that came up also as not wanting to intrude on that property with too much lighting.
Yeah,
so
it's a balance.
Becomes a little tricky there. But we have not heard anything about the incorporation of cameras. We could definitely follow up with the applicant and inquire about that before Monday and give you an answer if that's been considered or if that's being included in their design.
Or if the...
If I could add to what Rachel just said about the security cameras, Sarah has indicated that the owner's representative, or I'm sorry, the applicant's representative has indicated that there will be security cameras there set up on the building.
And they will make contact with police for if somebody starts to encamp. That's
The developer would have to provide more information about that, but I do know at Planning and Zoning Board, they indicated there would be lighting and security cameras on the property.
And then the other question I had was just a general question about the downtown business designations, DV1, DV2. What's the character of those downtown business districts, 1 versus 2?
Councilmember Summers, so the difference with that is really kind of the intensity, kind of like our other zoning districts where we have different levels of them. So the DB1 is a less intense district, so more of retail, more kind of service-oriented businesses, while DB2 gets more into of an intense type of use that includes some other kind of service-oriented businesses that can be more auto-dominant.
I guess what struck me on this, and this is just a general comment, is, and we have some planning coming up for the city, the new general plan. When I read this and I saw downtown business too, downtown and storage units do not, in my head, connect at all, right? They're light industrial, fine, but when I think of downtown, I'm thinking of that commercial, retail, vertical integrated mixed use, not this kind of plan. So as we go forward, I think this is part of a larger discussion about how we describe what these zoning designations are, because it doesn't fit in my head. That said, I think Jim has already mentioned that we have a very limited scope of judicial authority here. It's really just an approval of a site plan on what staff and our legal office has agreed is an appropriate use for this site. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council, applying the review criteria within the code. So you get to apply those criteria to this site plan and decide whether or not and you can affirm, you can amend, you can make additional stipulations, or you can overturn the decision and effectively deny the site plan. But it's under those review criteria. So it's not the same as a rezoning, which is a legislative act.
All right, that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Pillsbury?
Sorry, I have a couple more questions. On this first bullet point right here, did you specifically address that the grounds for appeal was that one of those 3 zoning districts doesn't allow for self-storage? And I know you went through like the different spaces. So
yeah, so
yeah.
So the primary use, that self-storage facility, it's completely contained in that DB2 section where it's a permitted use.
Oh, okay.
The portions that have parking and retention, those are considered accessory uses that are incidental to any use. They're, they're part of requirements of the development code. And we look at those as they are permitted in those zoning districts as well.
Okay, so that's the explanation, that slide saying that the reason why you're not requiring the additional CUP is because it doesn't fit into either of those other zoning districts.
That's correct.
Okay. And then this is just a question, because I've never seen it before, but where you say the interpretation is not before council, what does that mean?
I'll let Jim.
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council, maybe, and I'll step one step back, and then I think you'll see the answer to it. The appellant has raised the issue that there's the different zoning districts on this particular property, and therefore it has some additional requirements. And that's really the application of the zoning code and the interpretation of the zoning code. Well, under the zoning code, the zoning administrator interprets the zoning code. That's Mary. And so she's has a formal interpretation. And so once that interpretation is applied, now that issue's resolved. And if the appellant wanted to, he could appeal that interpretation, and that would go to the Board of Adjustment. It's a separate process. So that council doesn't have to get sort of wound up into, well, wait a second, there's 3 different zoning districts. How does that work exactly? And are we deciding that, as opposed to, no, that's really an interpretation of the zoning code and how you apply the zoning code. That's the zoning administrator, and that's a Board of Adjustment issue. And so that particular issue that the appellant raised, we don't feel now is really applicable, right? Now, the other issues that are still before, whether it complies with the site plan, but the sort of strict compliance with the zoning code issue is really now was interpreted by the zoning administrator, and if the appellant wants, he can file a separate appeal now, and that will go to the Board of Adjustment.
And that's the slide we just talked about, that specific interpretation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
council, for just a little bit more explanation. So having split zoning on a property is not necessarily a unique condition. And we do see site plans that come through quite often. And I'll give you an example of Queens Park. It's kind of southeast Mesa. It was a county island, and around it is a lot of industrial. It's the way that the zoning there was established is a little different, but same concept. With them, they actually wanted to have more of a buffer in between their neighborhood and industrial uses. So in that case, those properties were specifically zoned with split zoning. So it has LI on kind of the exterior, and then surrounding that neighborhood is OC. So that was done intentionally to prohibit some of those uses in there and provide them more of a buffer.
And LI means an OC.
Light industrial and office commercial would be that less intense. But in those site plans, we've had several of those come forward in the last year. We do have similar circumstances where those accessory uses such as retention and parking are located in those OC portions, but that still helps buffer that into the more intense, that primary use.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Up?
Yeah, so I just want to make a few statements. First of all, usually site plans go through planning and zoning and they don't touch us, but because of the appeal that it is coming to us, because under the site plan, the zoning, it would be allowed by right, and so there wouldn't be anything, to really debate on that. So also on the interpretation, Mary's interpretation is in the documents, on the file. It's one of the last ones there if you want to look it over. But our responsibility on this is just to affirm or debate whether planning and zoning made an appropriate decision. That's basically all we are deciding. The interpretation, like Mr. Smith had mentioned, is more getting into planning and zoning and the Board of Appeals. I had a question on the location on slide number 3. I didn't realize it before, but there's a slight cutout on the west side of the property. I was wondering what that was.
Councilmember Duff, that's a city, it's trying to see if it's a substation or if it's a pump, but that's owned by the city. It's a utility.
Okay, so we don't have to worry anything about that. And also, a sign was posted on this property.
That is correct.
As far as the approval. And does the sign go up about the same time that the notifications are sent out, 15 days?
That is
prior?
correct, yep. That's required by the zoning ordinance that it be posted the 15 days prior to the public hearing.
Okay. And also, just to let you know, I haven't heard from the, is it appellant? I haven't had any, he hasn't reached out to me, or I haven't had any discussion, so I have nothing to contribute as far as any additional conditions. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Maybe just a process question, Jim, is because of the, I hadn't seen an appeal, but do all appeals go then to the city council, or is there a process where it goes to the zoning administrator, they issue the findings and it stops there, or what's the process there? Just
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council. So on site plan only cases, they can be appealed to the city council. It is 2015, the last time one of these occurred. So, and just, we changed the code about 15 years ago. All site plans used to come to council, and they didn't sort of end at the Planning and Zoning Board. And there's still occasionally site plans that come to council because there's a specific stipulation on the case that says that zoning is stip to a very specific site plan. And so if you change that site plan, you have to bring back that stip. That was a question that was asked earlier. So you still see sometimes to change that stip, you end up bringing back a rezoning in a site plan case. So if it's a site plan only case, it comes to the council as an appeal. Most appeals, though, it's usually the Board of Adjustment. So they see other types of appeals. And so that's why you only see it every, whatever it's been, 8 years.
all right. Perfect. Any other questions? All right, we'll move forward.
So I think
Was it?
that was all the presentations we had that are here. We have obviously the two presentations as part of the study session.
And was it 5A?
5A and 6, let's see how they're listed here. Well,
It's
so
2A.
it's 2A is
2A.
now the general plan, which is 6B. Oh, I don't- The 2A, the general plan, public participation plan is on the agenda. Well, both of these are on the agenda. I think one is 6B and one is 5A.
We'll get started.
Okay, good morning again, Vice Mayor, council members. Mary Kapaski Brown, Planning Director, and with me today is Jeff Robbins, the project manager for the general plan, and Rachel Nettles, our Assistant Planning Director. Sorry, Jeff, you're driving.
Coordinated.
So today we want to review with you the public participation plan that's part of the general plan process. In this, we'll go through the background, the public participation plan itself, and then the next steps in the general plan process. So as you're aware, the current general plan was adopted in June of 2014. That document is a policy framework that helps us to meet the requirements of the Arizona Revised Statutes. One of the requirements of any general plan is to prepare and have the City Council actually adopt a public participation plan. We've been working closely with our consultants, Logan Simpson, who are online with us to answer any specific questions that you have, and their sub-consultants as we prepare this plan. So the public participation plan has been developed to ensure effective, early, and continuous public involvement through the entire general plan update process. By including all of our geographic, ethnic, and economic areas of the city, what we're looking to do is to work towards creating a general plan that will benefit all of our residents and our businesses. Without the input of our residents and our businesses, the general plan will miss that opportunity to make sure that it's reflecting the vision of not only the planning staff, but the city council and our residents and our businesses. So public input on a general plan is key. We want to make sure that we're responding to what the community sees as their needs as the plan's developed, so that we can ensure that we're creating a high quality and equitable city. By listening to what our residents say and what our businesses say, we'll be able to develop a plan that the residents really can start to buy into and believe in. In developing the public participation plan, 3 key strategies were identified. The first is inclusive engagement, so that we can ensure that residents have a voice and that they must be heard in preparing the update. The second is the innovative use of technology, so that we use technology to make sure that we are disseminating information and broadening our outreach. And then finally, that we have seamless coordination with the other city plans that are in process right now, so that we can make sure that there's a seamless public participation process for all of those plans so that we don't get input fatigue. I'm going to hand it over to Jeff now, who's going to cover some of the tools and techniques that we've identified as part of that strategy.
Vice Mayor, Council, so we have a number of different tools. The very first tool that you will see us deploy in the community starting next week is what we call community conversations. And these are listening sessions where we're going to go to every council district in person and spend time meeting with different residents there, asking them about their vision for Mesa and finding out what they want the city to become in 2050. We also have a robust translation program that will be translating our materials into Spanish and other languages as appropriate. And we're working very closely with the Mesa and Espanol team to make sure that we are not only developing content that's spoken in a way and read in a way that's appropriate for Mesa residents, but we're also getting that collateral to our residents who speak Spanish as their primary language. We also have a speaker panel events where we have experts talking about the general plan. And this is about education because like many of us, we don't know all the facets of what this plan includes, and we want to make sure that as residents are making decisions and giving their vision for how the city should become, that they're also learning about what the general plan does and about the city. Then there's a plan showcase. That is when we have the final draft of the plan, that we're taking that out to the residents and saying, hey, did we get this right? Can you look at this? And we're also then taking more feedback at that point and adjusting as necessary. One of the key aspects of inclusive engagement is also our engagement tracking tool. Throughout this process, we will be asking people to tell us what intersection they live closest to so that we're able to find out where they are in the city. And that way, if, let's say, District 5, we're not getting enough engagement there, we can adjust our strategies and target that area a bit more to try and drive engagement, and that way ensure that we're having equal feedback from across the city. And at the end, we'll talk about what we've done and then present the plan and show the city, okay, this is the plan for the next 10 years and then eventually out to 2050. One of the things that's very exciting about this is the technology. At our last presentation to you, Council, you made it clear that you want us to engage in a different way, in new ways. And we have wonderful partners here now in downtown, the ASU Mix Center. And we also have our fantastic consultants that are working with us to help residents to see the city in a different way and to visualize different choices in new ways. So I'll talk about ArcUrban and ArcGIS in a moment, but what I want to focus on here is our Urban Labs workshops. After we've gone out to the community and we've heard what they want to say about the city, we've started developing some vision statements. That's where we have our big community meetings, and we're calling those Urban Lab workshops. And residents will be able to come. We'll be having augmented reality, virtual reality, different ways of seeing different areas of the city, and we'll be collecting feedback there. And we'll also have other ways that are traditional. You know, we'll have the paper there too for those who prefer to engage just with conversation. We want to make sure that every resident has a way to engage in a way that they're comfortable engaging. Of course, we'll be using social media and online questionnaires and a new software that the city has recently purchased called it's called Bang the Table. It's a Granicus product, and it integrates with our website. So ArcUrban is a Esri product. It is the definitive product that's used all over the world, and all the data that we are gathering, we're keeping into this system, and it'll allow planning to be able to continue to use all this data going forward. So why that's important is we're not just taking data and then using it once and then destroying it. We're keeping that intellectual product that we're creating and using it going forward to help inform our planning decisions. It helps us to measure the impacts of different decisions and also, again, to visualize the city in a 3D environment. ArcGIS story maps. There's a lot of stories to tell in the city of Mesa, right? We have so much going on at our airports and so much change happening that it's sometimes helpful to get a recap of where we've been so that residents can quickly digest, okay, here's the story of this particular area, and then give valuable feedback. So this tool is going to allow us to integrate video, to integrate images and overlays of the city in a 3D environment that help residents quickly and very easily understand the many complexities of this very large city that you all manage. I'm going to play a quick clip here. We're going to see if this works. But there, okay, so what you're seeing here, this is somebody's coffee table, and that's their rug behind them. And what we're doing here is we're actually projecting, we're casting a model onto the table using somebody's phone. So our vision is that we can have anybody at home get onto the website, be able to access this through a QR code, and then just at their table be able to visualize right there in 3D a different environment. And so it was a little hard to tell, but some of these buildings actually have depth. And so you can move your phone in and actually go into the building, come out of the building. It's really incredible technology. All right. And then Lumion. So we're going to also have fly-throughs of our different economic districts. And you'll notice that this video is a little clunky. That's kind of the point why we're showing it, because this is sometimes what 3D looks like. You have people walking in place, and you get a vision for it, you get some depth, but it's a little clunky. So we're enhancing the tools we're using a product called Lumion. And what Lumion does is it creates a 3D web around the buildings to make it look more realistic, so you're not focusing on all the things that aren't quite right, they don't feel real, and you're able to really immerse yourself in the experience. As part of this and all of the suite of products that we're using, we are working very closely with ASU's Mix Center. We've met with Jake Pinholster, the director there, and we think there's some very exciting prospects to start using their cutting-edge technologies to incorporate those into our planning process and then to deploy those technologies at our public meetings. I will say a word of caution that this is all, again, cutting-edge technology. We've never done this before. Most cities have never done this before. So we are going to experiment with these different technologies. If they work, we're going to use them. If they don't, we're not going to put them out in the public space where they're just confusing and clunky. But we're going to work very hard to polish these down so they're actually productive and useful for understanding planning decisions. And then last is our seamless coordination. We do have 4 other specific plans in the city: the Transportation Master Plan, the Water Resources Integrated Master Plan, the Transit Master Plan, and then the Balanced Housing Master Plan that are all, they're all very important because the data from these feed up into the general plan. So we've been working with the different project managers in these departments to make sure that we're coordinating the timing and the public engagement, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's the idea that they all time out just before we finish our final draft of the general plan, so that we're getting the most latest up-to-date information and then feeding that into the general plan. And then speaking of the public engagement, we do know there's a lot of engagement fatigue if we have 5 plans all going out and asking for feedback at the same time. So our website is unified. Our promotion, newsletters, invitations to take online questionnaires, they're all unified. Our events are going to be unified. And then any of our listening sessions are unified. So we are working closely to make sure that the questions that transportation wants, they're included in our master survey, transit. It's all going to be a unified experience that most residents hopefully won't even know that there's 4 or 5 different plans all at the same time. It's just one unified experience. Lastly, this is the logo for the general plan outreach. Let me explain these 2. So the one on the left, that's tomorrow's Mesa. That is our outreach logo that we're going to be using for all the different plans. So you'll see this logo a lot coming up. As we begin to transition out of the public engagement, we just begin to start working on the plan itself. The actual brand of the document that you will see online will be the logo on the right. So one on the left, that's our public engagement logo. The one on the right, that's what will actually be in the plan itself. So they're tied together. It's about moving our city forward, similar color elements, but the one on the left's a little more fun and engaging. The one on the right's a little more technical and plannery. One last thing too, we also heard, Council, did you have a comment, Vice Mayor?
Mr. Summers?
Visit Mesa is doing a planning thing right now. I've heard there's maybe some similarities between, or no, with their logos and wording, that kind of thing. Is there any completely different and separate?
Councilmember Summers, that is correct. They are doing a similar planning. We found out about this, well, I found out about this 2 days ago. So we've reached out through the Public Information Office to them to do an introduction with myself and with Visit Mesa. And I'm hoping in the next few weeks that I can sit down with them and we can find a way to, if we can, if it works, to meet together so that we're not confusing the public. And then the other thing, I'll jump back to our logo. I believe I think their tagline is something about Forward Mesa. And ours is
Forward. Okay.
Mesa Forward.
I think they're pretty far, much farther ahead than we are. Because I met with their consultants months ago, so I think they're going to do some public meetings. But we can be informed by them.
Yeah, they asked me, I agree. They asked me to share on social media their Mesa Forward. The concern I had was that I didn't want to confuse that effort with this effort. There needs to be some clarity.
You'll find this effort will be very comprehensive in every district. I don't know that would be, I think the scope and breadth of this will be very different than what they're looking at.
All right, yeah, that's just my concern. I don't want people thinking they've already participated in something and that has nothing to do with this. So anything we can do to include them and build a wall at the same time. Have fun with that.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember, thank you.
Bridges with wall, guardrails.
Guardrails. And also, Councilmember, we, PIO, Anna met with, and I met with together yesterday to talk about this and to engage with their team. So we are continuing those talks and we will build that guardrail.
Perfect. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
So one other thing that came up, Vice Mayor, Council, at our last presentation to you was we need to simplify the general plan. It's too complex, it's too long, too many words. We understand that, and we heard that. We've tried to respond to that feedback. So the document that is the actual plan, there's a lot of words, and that's really meant to respond to state statute and answer that call to lay out a plan. Well, we also want to take the public participation plan and turn it into something that somebody can quickly and easily digest. And that's why we have a public-facing brochure that takes all the text in the public participation plan and it turns it into something very visual, very engaging. You can flip through it in 2 minutes and understand, how do I engage as a resident? What are my opportunities? And this is a living document that as we go through the different steps of this process, we'll be able to put up more information and include up-to-date, next week, when can you engage, where are these events going to be, and then different opportunities. So hopefully that makes sense. Trying to simplify, make it more accessible to the public.
Thank you, Jeff. So as you can see from the timeline, there's really 7 different stages or phases of the plan, and we're currently between the community context, which is a lot of the data collection, the conversations that Jeff was talking about, and that vision setting. So as we're moving through this, each of the tools and techniques that Jeff just talked about will be used at various points. So under the community context, which is kind of where we are living today, we've got our technical advisory committee, which is a department-wide committee that's working with the team to ensure that we're doing the coordination of our plans. And we've also got the appointed general plan advisory committee meetings, and those are regular. Those will occur at every single stage through this entire process. We're looking to do a lot of the community conversations, the one-on-one interviews, the focus groups, so that we're starting to get feedback from various members of the public. We're meeting with a lot of the council members. We've met with the mayor, so that we're getting feedback from businesses, residents throughout the city. The online questionnaires will start during this time. We'll also have informational booths. So for example, I think it's the Lunar New Year at the end of the month. We'll be there with an informational booth, handing out information, trying to engage people, getting them to be involved in the process. And then we'll have, and again, throughout the entire process, we'll have city council work sessions, and we'll also have some of those work sessions with the planning and zoning board. February, March, we start our vision setting, and again, the TAC and the GPAC will continue to meet. We'll continue with our questionnaires, our online events, and then those work sessions. As we head into April through October, this is where we actually start to take the information that we're gathering and we actually start writing, well, hopefully we're writing the plan before that, but we actually start to develop our policies, our guiding principles, and how we're going to implement this. So the speaker panel event that Jeff had described, those kind of TED Talk events will occur during this period, and then the Urban Lab workshops. The draft plan, we'll have a draft by the end of this year. Again, you can see we'll continue with the TAC and the GPAC meetings, our questionnaires, and then again, we'll have that showcase, those showcase events that Jeff had described. And then finally, April and May of next year, we'll have our thank you to everyone for all of their participation, and we'll have our Planning and Zoning Board hearings and our City Council hearing, with the adoption coming in May of next year, so that this can get onto the ballot in November of 2024. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. We're happy to take your input, and just wondered if you had anything that you'd like to add.
Questions? Mr. Summers?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That's a good plan. It feels a little bit like we're behind by a week or two, because we're supposed to be starting on community meetings, within the next month, according to this? So do we have those scheduled yet? Locations or?
So Vice Mayor, Councilmember Summers, what we are doing right now is we are starting to schedule those. So for example, we will be at the Asian Festival at a booth there. We are identifying other locations. After this meeting, we'll be meeting with each of you to have a listening session. At that time, we'll be showing some of the different events that we've identified using the city calendar as occurring in your districts. And we'd love your feedback. If that's not the right event, there's some other one that you know about, we would love to adjust and make sure we're getting to all the events that are where you think they're right will get the most people in your district.
Perfect. I did see that on my calendar, and I have some ideas of specific communities I want to target for various reasons. The other community, when we talk about communities that I want to make sure that we engage with, and Mary spoke to it very briefly on one of her slides, is the business community, economic development, and our developers. Part of that seamless coordination with the various city plans here, I know that Gateway has a plan. They just talked about a plan for the Falcon Field area. So making sure that those are seamlessly integrated into this plan, I think, is important as well. And I want us to be, the business community, to be an active participant in the development of this plan. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Goforth?
So who is it that sits on the TAC and the GPAC?
So actually, I'll let Jeff answer that question. Sorry.
Oh, so Vice Mayor, council members, go forth. For our GPAC, so that's the General Plan Advisory Committee, that's a resident-formed committee, and that was appointed by the City Council. And so there are 7 members. 6 of them come from boards and committees, standing boards and committees, so they're very familiar with the city processes. And then we also have a member of that who has had almost no experience with the city, and that's a great balance because we get both of those viewpoints on the GPAC. And so they meet approximately every other month. It depends on the milestones, and they're giving feedback to the public. For example, they met on the public participation plan and approved that, and they're also guiding the processes as we go. The Technical Advisory Committee, that's the TAC, that's citywide department heads, or not department heads, there's different members from the departments that serve on that, and they're really our technical experts. So when we start going in and talking about the economic development portion or a portion that talks about sustainability, that's where we really rely on those technical experts to say, hey, this is what we're drafting, is this right? Can you provide us information? And there's a really ongoing collaboration with them to make sure we get the text and the substance of the plan correct.
That's great, because that's kind of what I was wondering, is how you really are incorporating each separate department. I know you said those 4 additional plans will incorporate up, but how is that really happening? Are you having conversations with those departments as you go? Yeah.
We just met this week with that group, so.
Okay. We actually have a meeting with Chris and all the directors and deputy directors separate from the TAC, so that we're able to make sure that they're also involved in it, so they understand timelines and things like that. So if we have to adjust them, that we can.
Okay. And so the community conversations are going to happen, you said, at events and things like that. You're not specifically sitting down with individual residents.
Oh, I better clarify that, Vice Mayor, council member. So We are doing several different engagement processes at the same time. So there's multiple layers of engagement all happening at their different phases. So one piece is the one we talked about, and that is where we're going out and just having the booths. But the other is an invitation. And Councilmember Summers, this really gets back to what you were talking about, is direct invitations to do interviews. And so some of these will be one-on-one interviews. That may be CEOs of our major employers where it's appropriate to sit down with them and do a one-on-one interview and get their take about what do they need in Mesa, what do they want Mesa to become. Others are going to be these group chats where we have think of this maybe as a group of interested HOAs, right? HOAs have that similar thread. We sit down with all the HOAs and we have them tell us what they're seeing in the city or some other interest group, but we're trying to get them together and then just hear what they have to say.
And we'll go over that, sorry, we'll go over that in an individual.
Yeah. Do you have that slide that shows all those categories of stakeholders?
I don't have it on this slideshow.
Okay. If you saw that, you'd see, I mean, I don't know, you had like 6 or 8 different categories, and it lists the major employers, listed the nonprofits, listed educational, I can't remember all the categories. So each one of those will have a specific outreach.
Okay. And Council Member Goforth, what we can do as well, I'll bring a copy of that to your listening sessions today, so you can look over that. And if there's any nonprofit, any partners that you work with that you're aware of that we missed, we want to know about those, so we can invite them to engage.
Fantastic. And then on broadly, how are you getting people to participate? You know, other than these private, these direct invitations, setting up a booth, how do you really get people to participate? What are you doing?
So Vice Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, yes, this is an ongoing challenge. It's always difficult, especially when you're talking about something esoteric and kind of hard to understand about why does this impact my life? You know, getting people to come out can be a challenge. I think this might be a great question for our consultant who's joined us online. They are helping us a lot with how to drive people to these events and not just to bring them to us, but how do we get to them? So I'm going to turn it over to, let's see, it'll be Bruce Megan or Megan Moore. They are the project manager and the principal from Logan Simpson.
Good morning, Council, Vice Mayor. Glad to see everyone. And anyone from our consulting team, Megan Moore, our project manager, as well as Terry, our assistant project manager, can easily chime in here. I think Jeff said it right, that this is always a challenge, but it's also an exciting time for the public to be involved in forming what the future will be for their children, and also other businesses that may be located there. The way we have our public involvement set up is just continual touch points with the public throughout the whole year-long plus process. And we're going to use both hands-on methods, where it's fun events, mixed with technology. And that makes it a little bit more exciting for people to participate versus the standard governmental meeting. The method that we're going to use, and that's contained within both the public-facing public involvement plan, but also your internal one, uses multiple techniques. So that's everything from online, urban labs where you can sort of visualize things where people are enticed to go, to things like TED Talks where it's seminars like you're going to a concert out on a Friday night, to engagement events that are charrette oriented. All these events have a little component of fun, but it does entice people to engage. Every time that someone engages, we always track who they are in some form, and as Jeff alluded to, the general location, so that if we're missing people, we can adjust and go out to that area and not grab people to participate, but encourage them to participate for any places where we find holes. We got to realize that there's going to be different levels of engagement. One is where people will be aware of the plan, so maybe through social media, through the website, through flyers and so on, that this is occurring. But we also want people to be more than aware. We want people to actively engage. So it's going to be multiple techniques. Each one of them happens at every stage of the project, and we use a slightly different technique at each one to see which one's most effective. I know that's a long answer, but it's there's a lot of tools being applied at one time. And Megan, feel free if you wanted to augment that answer.
Actually, Vice Mayor, Council, if I could add, one of the other things we'll be regularly emailing. We have all kinds of email lists to invite people to either participate in the different venues, the different events. With our social media, we'll probably, work through our public information office to make sure that, that word's getting out. Anytime you want to I don't use social media, but repost something that we have, I think as council members, you're with your constituents, that word from you is very different than it coming from City Hall. So I think we'll use Planning and Zoning Board, we'll use the General Plan Advisory Committee. They all have touch points that are different than we have. And Jeff, I don't think you mentioned the community ambassadors during the presentation, but when we see that we've got a gap or a hole in our outreach, we'll be reaching out to people who live and work in the community, who maybe through a church or maybe through a community center have a network that we're missing, so they can help us to then later engage with those groups when we're through this tracking tool, and where we see those gaps to really kind of hone in on those people to make sure that we're touching them. We can't make people engage. All we can do is make it easy for them to engage.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Duff?
Neighborhood services and our neighborhood leadership program is another resource I'm sure that you've thought of. I'll make a comment on the logo. I like the optimistic idea of having rain coming out of one of those clouds. I really like that touch, so I have to acknowledge whoever decided to put that in. So I'm enthused by the technology aspect that we're incorporating in this. It seems exciting and a new way to experience and engage people, and certainly promoting that we're using it sort of out of interest sake. Maybe people would like to come to the meetings to experience that. When you do the virtual reality or this 3D world, is this a mapping of what's existing, or is it showing scenarios of different ways that the city could look, or both, or am I going down a rabbit hole that
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, that's a great question. I'm going to have our consultant answer a little bit, but I'll give you a quick answer. From my understanding is that when you think of, let's say, downtown, I'll give you one thing we're trying to do and trying to put you in a scenario that we're trying to create. So you're walking downtown and you see a QR code and it says engage in the general plan. So you scan that QR code, and then all of a sudden something augmented reality comes up on your phone. You're looking through your phone, almost like your camera view, and you're scanning around the downtown, and you can see all the existing buildings that are there, but then you can also see these kind of graphic buildings that are put above those that maybe show a version of Mesa in 2035 or 2050, and what could happen depending on different changes we make in the general plan. So it is about incorporating what is there, but it's also envisioning different scenarios that could be there, and helping people to understand choices a bit better. It's hard when we look at a piece of paper and say, oh, we talked about downtown business 1 and downtown business 2. What is that? Well, it's one thing to see that as a number, and then to see it through goggles and through a vision, and that is something that we are trying to bring to the table. Bruce, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Just to get people excited about the possibilities, not quite knowing that some of this, as Jeff said, is experimental, and we'll try to focus on the technology that is most accessible and approachable to people as we go through this. But it's really, instead of, Jeff, you said it well, instead of trying to understand what a zoning category is, and even the discussion that was prior, that's very difficult for the public. But they can understand what the future will look like when they look left and right. Do you like what you see? And that's the questions that we'll be asking. But we'll also give them choices at some point, saying, when you look left and right, do you like what you see? But here's some of the options with this. It could actually look like this which might be, you know, a little bit different, a little bit higher, but maybe include a little bit more transit, a little bit more oriented towards employment, for example, like the discussion you had, and that has these benefits versus something like this, which has these benefits. So trying to use visualizations versus too much planner speak. And then in terms of technology, it's easy to visualize what could be through the way ASU has set up their labs, which is right next door to you. They've got one room where you just look at a film of, say, a visualization of the future, and this is more the site scale or something along those lines. They've got a separate lab or room for the public that's available for small groups of the public where a film will circle around you. So you'll actually be able to look left and right and see what's around you without having to have goggles on and so on. And then they've got a third lab where you can use AR and VR, essentially visual glasses, where you can sort of move between scenes. So those are technologies we'll experiment with ASU, but we want to make sure, as Jeff said, that we'll choose the most appropriate technology for the public.
Great, thank you very much.
And council, to add on to that, so one of the most kind of powerful tools that we'll be using is that ARC Urban product that Jeff showed earlier, and that on a more macro scale. So that has all of our current building footprints, that has imagery for the city. So we're able to visualize what's existing now, but that's the main tool that we can use for scenario planning, and we easily can adjust and show different densities in areas and have fly-throughs and be able to work with the public on, you know, right there in real time and kind of play out different scenarios. So that's going to be a really important tool in this.
Perfect. Mr. Freeman?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to circle back a little bit to community involvement. How are the TAC and the GPAC committees, have they been established?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, yes. The TAC has been established, and also the GPAC has been established.
How was that established? And how did that work out?
So the TAC was a discussion internally with city management, and also it was also based on who the departments were having to lead their specific plans in some cases. So for example, in transit, it made sense that Jody would be leading at transportation. Sure. Sabina King was running it. So
I think the question was on the GPAC. So the council, the mayor recommended to you all a list of those individuals, and the council then approved it, if that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, I am.
And
I guess I should have looked at it a little better.
Yeah, and I think I want to say, as we follow the same template that's been used in the past, where you have a representative from P&Z, you have a representative from a different other EDAB, I think, is on there. So
how about TAB?
Yes, I think all those were on there. Do you have the list?
I do have the list.
And we also tried very hard. I think the mayor's office tried to not only select from there, but also try to make sure we were trying to get a representation across the city. So I think we were successful in that area, I think.
Yes, city manager, we were successful. We have every district, we have 7 members, and so we had representation across the district, and they're all different disciplines, different standing boards. We really tried to create a very diverse set. And so if you'd like, I have the names here, council member of the
I can get them later.
Yeah, but it was recommended, as the mayor can only recommend the board, and then the council approved it probably 2 months, 3 months ago.
I think December.
Was it that late? I don't know. Yeah, it was on the agenda, so.
I believe it was early November, because we met in late November.
Because we were trying to get a meeting with that board quickly before, because they've already seen a lot of this already, so.
I think my just future comment on it, we need to pluck individuals out in geographical areas to help with community involvement, neighborhood, HOAs,
Sure.
and everything. So hopefully that was done. I didn't look at that list really thoroughly, but is there any way to make the list even a little to 9 people instead of 7? Is 7 typically our template?
Yeah, I think the idea was, in order to maintain a good balance through each district and not then weight it one way or the other, we tried very hard to make sure there was representation from the boards that council appoints that have what's transportation or economic development or planning and zoning, as well as trying to represent across the city. So I'd say we've got that balance right now, and I think that's because you're 6 districts across the city, that's what we were able to accomplish.
Okay. Do we have a standby list in case someone doesn't want to serve on the committee?
They've already been vetted and interviewed
They'll
with
be
the
there.
mayor's office, and they've already met, so
Several
it's
times.
already up and going.
All right, thanks. That's
Ms. Goldfarb?
Well, I was just going to echo maybe a little bit of Mark, that maybe the importance of getting people involved that aren't typically involved. I know there's value in having people that sit on the existing boards, but, and I know you mentioned the ambassador I mean, that might be a good place to have somebody from every district sit on maybe an ambassador committee that are not typically involved in city process and business. I think might be nice. And I don't know if that kind of is maybe along the lines of what you're saying too.
I think through the census, I think we use this community ambassador program where we got students, kind of the mini community influencers, where they were tagged to go out to their network and build kind of conversations about the census, make sure people get counted. So I think the same kind of thought here would be useful to get people involved that kind of are gravitated to maybe a location as far as maybe a faith leader or a student or other people in the community that kind of generate conversations with individuals. So, Ms. Duff?
Didn't you say there was one position for a member of that board that was not involved in any of the committees and was not familiar with the usual city process?
Yeah, it fell out
So-
because it didn't, when you looked at all the committees and looked at the council, we ended up with, we couldn't match up in District 2. And so we ended up finding someone in real estate. Were they real estate?
Yeah, she's in real estate.
Real estate, yeah. So there was a lot of,
Right, so
that's
we
why I'm
can have
saying, there's
representation
two
from
different
someone
parts.
who's
So
not
this
involved.
committee we're talking, GPAC is, I'll call it technical, but they are reviewing the process and they actually have to recommend the plan to you. That's one side. The outreach, the ambassadors, that can be a variety of different people, but in order to create kind of the validity of the process and having, because all these plans go through TAB, they go through EDAB, they're gonna go through P&Z, we wanted to have a representative who was from those groups, who was on there early on, so they can go back and report to the boards you appoint and be able to talk about the process and their involvement. And it just ended up that the number of boards that we had was, I think, one short of the 7. And so, and we were trying to create more of a balanced demographics of female and Hispanic, and that's where we ended up with in District 2, I believe.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right, we'll move forward with item 2B, presentation and discuss the proposed homestead at Lehigh Crossing development project, including the rezoning and development agreements. Thank you. And we have the same people here, just shifting chairs, so.
Give us a moment to
Go ahead,
shuffle.
Rachel. That's
All right.
Thank you, by the way, for your previous presentation.
yes.
Okay. So council, we wanted to give you a presentation on a zoning case that is going to be coming forward. This is one that you might be familiar with. It's been in the process for some time. So we want to kind of give you an update of where it's at. There's also an associated development agreement with it. So we wanted to give you some information on where that is at and what that entails. So this project is, it's located south of McDowell, east of Gilbert Road, and this is the location of the former Chrisman Farms homestead site. So what the request is, it's to rezone the property from RS43 and RS43 with the historic overlay to RM4 with the planned area development. It also includes a site plan review, and it included a special use permit, and I'll go into that more detail later, but that was actually approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. But this is to allow for a multiple resident development, and there's also an accessory commercial component with this. So as a little bit of background, as I was saying, this has been in the process for some time. So over a year ago, this went to the Planning and Zoning Board. Originally, the request was for RM5 with a PAD, so a little bit more dense of a development. So that was heard by the board in 21. They ended up recommending denial on this case. There's been quite a bit of public comment on this and concern. Some of those topics are related to traffic and the roundabout there. There were concerns about the compatibility of the development with the surrounding neighborhood, the density, and the height. So the applicant went back and made some modifications to their proposal. So they reduced the density on this project, and the request then changed to rezone it to an RM4 with a PAD versus the RM5. So what they did was they eliminated 40 units on that, and they also took out the 3-bedroom units, which was of particular concern to the neighbors about having 3-bedroom units. The request still remains that it's going to be a multiple residence development with an accessory commercial component. So the applicant did go back and they worked extensively with ADOT and with our transportation department to see if there were alternatives to the proposed roundabout. Ultimately, it was determined that the roundabout was the safest solution and it was the preferred design by ADOT and our transportation department. As I mentioned previously, this site currently has a historic landmark designation on it. So this was the Chrisman Homestead, as I mentioned. In 2000, that overlay was established in 2001. However, the structures on the site were removed in 2007, so it does not have historic significance anymore. The Historic Preservation Board actually voted to recommend to City Council to remove that designation, and that was done last year in 2021. So the general plan designation on the site is neighborhood suburban. The predominant zoning that gets used in that subtype is single residence, but multiple resident development is seen as an appropriate use when it's located at major arterial intersections. So what before you is a site plan. So the proposal is for one multiple residence building that has 222 units. Also, kind of here on the southeast corner, there is a, it's roughly 1,500 square feet of commercial space. And then you'll see that the entry comes off of McDowell here versus that cul-de-sac that we were mentioning earlier. With this request, there are a number of requested deviations through the planned area development. So some of those are reductions in parking and the number of covered parking spaces, reductions to the width of the landscape yards, and foundation base. And some of those are necessitated by fire code, also different constraints on the site, such as easements. To offset that, they are providing superior elevations. The quality of the elevations are very nice. They are proposing to have pedestrian connections to the trail that goes along the canal, and they also have very high quality amenities included in their development. So the special use permit that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board was required for the restaurant component, that commercial component that is being included. That will not include any drive-throughs, and it is right there at that intersection, that entryway to the development. Design Review Board reviewed this in 2021. They were very complimentary of the design. They did see it as very high quality. We did have neighbors that attended that at that time, and they did have concerns over the height and the design, as well as the landscaping along the trail. But as I mentioned, since then, the applicant had gone back and made revisions to many of those elements. So there's quite a bit of citizen participation, outreach that occurred through this. I know they had at least 3 neighborhood meetings. They met with the Lehigh Community Board. I know they had several one-on-one conversations with the surrounding neighborhoods. Staff received 3 responses that were in support and 1 in opposition. But we did have quite a turnout at our public hearings for these as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff at this time so he can discuss the development agreement.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, Council. So as Rachel mentioned, there's a development agreement as part of this project. The development agreement stipulates that the developer will at their sole cost install and construct and maintain landscaping adjacent to the canal area next to the project. At this point in time, there is envisioned to be a 10-foot wide pedestrian trail, paved trail with desert trees and shrubs. The maintenance term of this agreement is for 10 years, and that there is currently a piece of property that is currently owned by the developer and who's being purchased by the developer that will be quitclaimed to SRP. It is also important to mention that this particular DA, it is going to require a permit from SRP and ADOT. So on the next slide, we're going to show you what that landscaping looks like, but I want to make it clear to council that the city does not control the permit for that. And so in the end, if whatever is submitted to ADOT and SRP, if it conflicts with any different infrastructure on the site, this could look different. So we wanted you to be aware of that. Finally, it's important to mention that the city is being involved because SRP and ADOT do not enter into canal licenses with individual developers. They like to partner with entities that are considered permanent, like a municipality. So we're entering into that and essentially then flowing all of the obligations for construction and maintenance of these improvements to the developer. So this is located at the furthest northeast extreme of the project. You'll notice that there are two different entities there, one in yellow, one in red, and then there's also some improvements that are on areas that are not shaded. So this is a complex piece of property, but essentially many of these improvements will be on SRP property. That's who I mentioned we'll be entering into an agreement with for a license. And then we're using an existing license with ADOT to also extend those improvements right up to the underpass. So essentially what this will do for neighbors and residents there is that they'll be able to go to the trailhead improvements that are on the north side of McDowell and then go through the underpass, and there'll be a continued extension of the improvements and trail that leads right down to the canal path.
So in summary, staff finds that this proposal complies with the general plan. It met the criteria for the special use permit that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Board, and it meets the criteria for the planned area development overlay and site plan review, so staff is recommending approval with conditions. We'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Ms. Spilsbury?
On slide 9, didn't you say they're requesting an RM4 PAD now?
That is correct. So originally the request was for RM5, but because of the denial and the neighborhood opposition, they reduced that to an RM4.
So is this, this chart says required RM5, proposed RM5. So I'm just, is this not an updated chart on slide 9?
Oh, okay. Let me get to where. The heading is incorrect, yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So this is the correct information. It just should be
Yes.
RM4 PAD. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Mr. Freeman?
So thank you for the presentation. We have the landowners here, property owners, the developer, and also some community neighborhood involvement here with attending the meeting this morning. And, you know, this has been a long work in progress for this development. And while I agree this is in the Lehigh area, obviously it's not part of the Lehigh sub-area, which we so cherish and just enjoy our rural ag life. And in fact, I've been out to the property numerous times while it was a historic area. Mr. Chrisman, who owned it, is my grandfather's cousin. But, you know, it's morphed into this island separated by the 202 canal, the 202, the canal, Gilbert Road, top of the hill. But through the actions of the landowners, property owners, and the developer, we've been able to take an unused piece of property that would look terrible. Most of you have been out there and looked at the property. If the development were to happen, it would be beautiful. But to the east of that and to the access to the tunnel, where this landscaping component would be, it would just remain dirt and rocks, and it would look unattractive. So kudos to the developer working with the city, SRP, with the agreements that you need to have to ensure. I was not going to approve this project until those components were done because there were some legal things that the city had to go through with SRP and ADOT and using the multi-use agreement. But overall, this development, this multifamily development, can be an asset to the area because there's no multifamily at all. And in reality, I would like to see 1 acre properties there, but in the past, 17 years, I don't know how long Mr. Gunning and Bailey have owned it, but quite a few years now, nobody's come to them forward to do that type of development. In fact, they have come to put in an RV park or a construction yard parking area in there, which is not compatible to that area, and I didn't feel that that was appropriate. So now that it's a multifamily, it's morphed into a really great development here. I'm looking forward for some more dialogue on that, but at the end of the day, we have a really good development agreement. We're attaching everything together, and for now, I'm going to support this project. I think it's a need for the area to have some multifamily, and again, even though other developments could happen, it's not happened in 17, 18 years. So I get consistent complaints from the neighbors about the ATV traffic, the graffiti, all the components there, and it's time to improve that area. So with that, thank you for your presentation. I don't know if my colleagues have any questions.
Mr. Summers up.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Again, good presentation. First question on the slides yet. What was this area used for before? Is this water retention or anything coming off of the DOT, the freeway? Or is it just a vacant piece of land?
Vice Mayor Heredia, Councilmember Summers. So it was a vacant piece of land. It was this homestead site. So on the screen, you can kind of see some images of what it previously was, but those structures were removed. So in essence, it has been vacant.
All right. Is there a history of flooding or anything on the site more recently? Because it's close to a canal, it's close, not too far from the river. Any drainage issues that we need to be concerned about moving forward, or no? It's just, when you look at it from a road, it looks pretty sunken. And my concern would be, is there any flooding issues that have to be mitigated off of this?
So I think engineering will deal with that with the developer at the time they bring in their plans. So I don't know that we know.
Yeah, Councilmember Summers, I wouldn't be able to answer that if there have been issues, but the drainage and grading plan has been reviewed by our engineering department.
And they're satisfied?
Yes.
All right. That was one of the issues I had.
Mr. Summers, maybe I can help you on that.
Yeah.
You know, historically, this land has been farmland and irrigated. There's been no flooding issues in that area because it's...
I would agree, but with the freeway coming in, there's been some grading changes and with, you know, obviously this land wasn't what it was 100 years ago. My concern was just looking at it from a map that if this had become a pool of water, then putting in an apartment would be a really bad idea. But if it's being dealt with engineering, then we can move forward with that. But I would like to make sure that that's being addressed, and just for my comfort level. I was there when we had the flooding issue over, I think it's District 4 now. And I don't want to face that again. Yeah. Maintenance term of 10 years. So if you go to slide 14, I have 3 questions off of this. Developer so cost, well, they're going to be adding some trees, shrubs, landscaping to what is the adjacent canal area with a maintenance term of 10 years. Who maintains it after the 10 years is up?
So Vice Mayor, Councilmember Summers, there's 2 options. The city can take that over, or we can just simply terminate the license and then everything is torn out. If the city takes it over, we have worked with the developer to make that much easier. In the past, it's difficult for transportation to take over the maintenance of some of these areas because it's difficult to transfer the irrigation systems if they're all tied into the development. But the developer has agreed to essentially build it in a way that the irrigation for this particular out parcel is going to be independent. So if the city chooses at that time to take that over, it would be a much easier proposition, but I can't speak to
Jeff,
that.
let's just clarify. Why is it only 10 years?
So the way SRP has worked, and this is partially caused by the Bureau of Land Management, is that they've taken all of their 25-year license terms and they've reduced them to 10. And part of that, from SRP's perspective, is simply for the maintenance and being aware of them. They had instances where they'd do these 25-year licenses.
Jeff, the answer is we can't get a license for more than 10 years.
Okay.
So it terminates in 10 years. So SRP will not extend it beyond 10 years. So that's the development constrained to deal with the obligations to maintain it for 10 years. And after that, we have to go back and have a conversation with SRP.
So they can also renew the license.
Renew it, but
they can renew the license.
But it's only a 10-year.
So this is basically what we can get at this point?
This is all that SRP will give us.
Very good. You mentioned on the bullet point 2 points down, permit from SRP and ADOT could make some changes to this site plan. How significant could those be?
Extreme. We have no control over what the final plan could look like. We do know, for example, that there are raised, essentially what it is these irrigation columns that come up and it steps the water down because there's a grade there. We have to, for example, put some area around that. Now, we've accounted for that, or I shouldn't say we, the developer who put together the site plan accounted for that particular nuance, but there may be other irrigation infrastructure in there that we don't know about. So I want to note that what's shown here, this could be very different. We don't have control over that.
So if this comes with some significant site plan changes, what authority would this council have to approve or disapprove of those? Are we moving into that site plan? Once we approve this zoning, are we moving into a site plan where it's pretty much we have no choice?
And Councilmember Summers, just to clarify, so when we're saying site plan, we are talking about this area up on the screen, not the actual site plan that is being approved by City Council.
Just this piece?
Just this piece.
And
that's a less concern.
can I just, is this on the east or west side? Where is this? If you could pull out.
Yeah, so it's in the far northeast corner of the property, so it's kind of an odd shape, but if you look down to that bottom right-hand corner of the screen that Rachel's kind of moving her mouse over, it shows that blue area. That is the area in question, so it's right off of McDowell Road in Lehigh.
And then for the enter into a canal license agreement with SRP, what is our, liability exposure for something like that?
So, Vice Mayor and Council, we've entered into these type of agreements in other areas and where we improve paths along the canal, and so they have sort of a template, so we're doing that. As that one, that's the best slide right there. The developer is putting improvements on in a trail connection on SRP property and ADOT property, and basically then the city is, like many other sort of trail paths, the city's entering into an agreement regarding that. So we have this in other areas of the city. The difference is the developer's doing the improvements and is going to maintain it for the first 10 years. In our other agreements, we don't have that, right? We're doing the improvements and we're maintaining it from the get-go. So that's sort of the biggest difference.
Well, and to the city attorney's point, that's the whole point of this little piece, is to connect it under the road so that we can go to the very same scenario you just talked about, where we are actually building out trailheads and improving the surfaces for trail on SRP canals. So this is just kind of continuation of trying to get this development connected over to the trailhead that's on the east side of this, so that it'll have the advantage of that whole loop. And so this is really just following through with what we're already doing with the Lehigh Loop Trail that's to the east that extends out quite a ways.
And if I may clarify, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Summers, so the DA is designed where the developer will step into the city's shoes when it comes to the responsibilities under the license. So that would include things such as indemnification, maintenance, and construction.
That's a word I like to hear. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm done.
Oh, okay. So is it safe to say in 10 years, we will try to extend the license? And then, so does it make sense to obligate the developer, if the license is extended for 10 years, that they will continue to maintain it?
So Vice Mayor and Council, you know, at some point, how many obligations are we gonna put on the developer? Realize this is not their property, it's offsite. We can already see that they're making improvements, they're building it, they're gonna sign an agreement that they're gonna, basically, SRP is gonna require an indemnity from us regarding, and then we're gonna require an indemnity from the developer, and we're getting that for 10 years. And then in 10 years, and this is why SRP signs documents with us, and so that, because we're here forever. And then this is connecting to a much larger trail that's really the city's trail system. So at some point, it's, you know, the city's likely gonna step in and take this over, right?
Which is the typical course.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, you know, one way to look at this is that the city's getting this portion, which is sort of a difficult portion of this trail, improved by the developer and getting 10 years of maintenance.
And getting trail that wasn't in our current plan, right? So, because we're still trying to finish out the Lehigh Loop Trail. So when, you know, that's why the city was hesitant to take this on in the first place, because it's not, we've already got commitments going to the east and trying to bring that through. But I think the mayor and the Councilman Freeman saw this development going in, and it was an opportunity to extend the benefit of that investment on the east side with the trailhead and that extensive trail system over there.
Mr. Freeman?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. You know, just to follow up, in the future, our multi-use pass will continue, and this will be incorporated into, I don't know if it's 410, you know, we'll have to do a Parks Pond back package sometime in the future. And if this is accepted into it and that portion of the trail on the Consolidated South, which we already have, we're spending $5.6 million directly on the east side of the tunnel. So there's going to be a brand new trailhead, hopefully built sometime this year, right, Chris? I hope so, and that'll wrap around and go for about 4 more miles. And so having the continuity with this development, the landscaping component, and SRP controls all the landscaping part of it. This is going to be zero-scaped. It's going to be very simple. It's going to be a gravel path when it comes off the canal. The equestrian user will be able to utilize this pathway to go underneath the tunnel, underneath McDowell Road. You can start actually at Gilbert Road, McDowell Road, and eventually Val Vista Road. And you go all the way to Granite Reef Dam with not having any vehicular traffic. But I don't want to get off track on that. I want to separate it. This is a good part of it, but the real meat and the bones is the site plan, the development, and what's transpiring there. And so with that said, I heard the comments, the mayor and I, and a lot of the staff, we met with ADOT regarding the roundabout. The roundabout's going to be a little bit larger than what typically is done, and it's going to be conducive to traffic flow. I personally like roundabouts. I think it moves traffic a little faster than intersections with streetlights. And we already have roundabouts on our freeways already. ADOT has allowed that to happen at Brown Road, University, and other places. So with that, I think the meat and the bones again is the development itself. And we have the developer and the landowners have worked consistently with the city and SRP for the other portion of that.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Smith?
Vice Mayor and Council, I should also point out the Monday meeting, this is just being introduced, the zoning. So in the February meeting, you'll get the zoning and the development agreement for the actual decision.
Perfect.
And Jim, when can neighborhood make comments?
So they can make comments at both meetings. Historically, most people don't come at the introduction because that's just a procedural vote to introduce, but they can come and talk at the introduction, but most neighbors come to the actual hearing when you're making the decision.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to next item on the agenda. Acknowledge the receipt of minutes of various boards and committees. Is there a motion and a second? Ms. Pillsbury? Mr. Summers, second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 4, next, current events and conferences attended. Council members? Ms. Spilsbury?
I just wanted to mention our inaugural Women Leading Mesa event yesterday. I think there are about 300 City of Mesa employees there, women employees that were there. And they had a guest speaker, Jenny Evans, that spoke about the chemistry of confidence and resilience for female leaders. And Councilmember Duff and I were both there in attendance, and I just really loved the event and thought it was great to feel that energy of all of those women, amazing women working for the City of Mesa together, and I look forward to future events with that.
Perfect. Any other?
Of course, I'll go over a long list of things. Last week, some of us attended the Mesa Police Department's 20-year service awards. I want to congratulate all of those people who had 20 years with the police department. We appreciate their service. I attended a ribbon cutting, and the mayor did too, for Ballet Etudes, which is at the Stapley in the 60, a phenomenal dance ballet institution. And I'm so glad to have him here back in Mesa. I'm also attended a Downtown Mesa Association board retreat, doing our strategic planning going forward, and it was well attended, and we had some great ideas. I'm excited for the year ahead. On Friday, I attended the Martin Luther King breakfast at the Phoenix Convention Center. Mesa's Liz Paulus of College Bound was awarded the Calvin C. Good Lifetime Achievement Award. I want to congratulate her and appreciate the work that she does in getting underprivileged kids into college. Of course, we had our own MLK celebrations. It was very special this year with a day-long celebration, starting with the honorary street naming on Center between Brown and First Avenue, Martin Luther King Street. We also proceeded with a parade and a festival celebrating 25 years of having that in Mesa. And lots of music, and I did a commissioned song from Visit Mesa, I think you can find online. It was a phenomenal celebration. The rain did hold for us, a little drizzle here and there, but it was good all day long. And then an exciting thing, I was able to view the models of the new Zenny Home project, which is going to be in downtown Mesa. It's a modular living. It kind of looks like container livings, but they're not container, but they look like containers. They're built to a lot of those dimensions, and it'll be at 29 West Main. The models are right behind Cider Core, and there was a preview to some of the for developers and some of us, and I think they'll be opening to the public. It will be a product that's available to purchase even outside of this development, that you could put on some land or maybe even an accessory dwelling unit at your home. We'll have to figure those out, but they're very cool, modular living, and I encourage everybody to check it out when it's open to the public. Thank you.
Right. Any other? Mr. Freeman?
So thank you for this strategic planning session we had last Thursday. That was great. Get a lot of ideas from us. Also got to attend the EVIT. We had a lunch there. Councilmember Goforth and I attended EVIT and learned about their programming, and that was very informational. I think other than that, you got the MLK, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, other than that, thank you.
Perfect.
I just have one.
Yeah, Ms.
So, yeah, I just attended EVIT as well as the Professional Firefighters Memorial Service on Sunday, which was really nice. And I did participate in Visit Mesa's focus group yesterday that they had with MMGY. So that was informative on what they're doing with their master plan. So.
Perfect. And I did also Child Crisis Arizona did a groundbreaking on their facility on Country Club. They say it's the greenest nonprofit building in the state of Arizona. They have water retention efforts. They got sunlight. They got net zero energy with the solar panels. So very exciting for that space, a vacant lot on Country Club in between Brown and University and Brown, I think. to get developed there. So, all right, we'll move on. Scheduling of meetings, Mr. Brady, future meetings.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just a reminder, our next council meeting will be on Monday, January 23rd, for both the study session and the council meeting. If you come a little bit early, I think our plan is to have one of our first new Ford Lightning electric pickups out here for you to check out. So we've got those delivered and detailed, so we invite you to come check those out a little before the meeting on Monday. And then just a reminder, this Saturday, Councilman Freeman, do you want to do it?
Yes, we have our Lehigh Sports Park ribbon cutting exhibition game. I hear you're heading up the soccer team, Chris.
I wasn't aware of that. That won't be very fun. That will be this Saturday, January 21st at 9 a.m. So we invite everybody up at 2228 North Center Street for the long-awaited opening of the Lehigh Sports Park. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Brady. And
could I add just one more? I'm sorry. We have our firefighter memorial on January 30th at 9 o'clock, and please be aware of that on your calendars as well. Here in Mesa at 2nd Street and Mesa Drive.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And failed misery, I told myself, hopefully this is not 2 hours long meeting, but it's great information by staff. Thank you, everybody that presented, and the information that was covered here. So motion to adjourn, Ms. Spilsbury, second by Mrs. Duff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.